class, we've took a look at global adjustments, selective adjustments, how to make selections, how to make manual selections, and how to use the adjustment brush. And today we're going to take a look at what adjustments are available inside of the program. So if we come on up here, we're going to have a series of icons, and these icons can be changed by simply clicking right here, and you get a different version. This is the old way, and this is the new way. And just remember, there are some basic presets and options available underneath of that. But we're not going to be taking a look at it because I want you to learn how to use the program first before you start clicking on presets. Now, our first one that we see right here is brightness contrast, and we've got brightness contrast, levels, curves, and exposure. In essence, they all do the exact same thing. They're used to brighten or darken your image. You do not need to know how, and I don't use all of them. I use one, I use curves. It's the most comprehensive and gives you the most flexibility when adjusting the image. Now, brightness contrast is probably the easiest to use because it's two little sliders, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. So you should try them out and pick the ones that you like the best. But basically the way these work, and we're not going to make any selections. So over here, you're just going to see when I select this, it's going to create that white mask that we see right there. So this is going to be a global adjustment. So anything that I want to do is always going to be in the properties. And if you do not see the adjustment in the properties, now in this case, it's because I clicked on the background, you need to come right up here. This is the adjustment. This is the mask. If you click on the adjustment, it's going to pop up in properties, and then that's going to allow you to adjust it. And you can do that at any time as long as you're working in layers. Just like I said before, we have multiple locations for these adjustments, and we're going to take a look at it. Because if you come down here to this one right here and you click on it, we're going to have solid, color, gradient, and pattern. Those do not exist up here. They also don't exist up here in layer, new layer adjustment. So we do have adjustments here, but not the ones that are available here. There's three different places that do the same thing, but if you want to make a solid color adjustment, you need to come over here and do it. Why? I have no idea. Let's go ahead and take a look. So our first is brightness contrast, and it's really simple. We've got an auto setting. This is going to set white and set black when you click this. This is not a good thing because you never want 100% black and you almost never want 100% white because pure white has no detail. Well, we want the detail usually in white. Now, there are occasions when setting white with no value is good. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and hit it. And yeah, it made this way too bright. That's normally what happens because it's setting bright white and a white with detail. It's overexposing it. If you need to reset that, you can simply come down here. That's the reset button, and we'll get rid of that. We have used the old legacy version of brightness contrast. There's no real sense in using that. So what we need to do is simply go to the right. It's going to brighten our image, and we go to the right. It's going to darken it. To increase contrast, meaning there's going to be the blacks are blacker, the whites are whiter. This way, it's going to flatten out the image. That's all this can do. So we're going to turn that one off and go to levels. Levels is probably the second best. So right here, we do have some presets that you could come in and select. I've never used them, so we'll just click lighter, and yeah, it makes it just a little bit lighter. It auto adjusts for you. Now, one of the things that's important is optimizing your histogram. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look down here. You see how the data kind of comes down here and it starts right about here in this location. So there's no data from here to here. So optimizing means we're going to take this little triangle and slide it to just before where that starts. So I'm just going to take this and slide it this way a little bit. Now, when I do that, I use something called the info panel, and the info panel is right down here. You can also come up here to window, info. As long as it's checked, you'll get it. This is invaluable, especially if you don't have a calibrated monitor. It gives you the exact digital information of everything in an image. Now I have mine set for RGB and K. K is the one I use 99% of the time. That stands for black in photography. And the way you change them is you can come to either one of these eyedroppers right here. If you click on this, it will give you the ability to change them. I'm pretty sure actual color and CMYK are the defaults. I don't use either one, but we want grayscale in this case. So what happens is I can come over here and let me get the lasso because it's more clear. I'll put that pointer right on there and you can see the K value. I'm going to be looking right here. The K value for this image was 4% and is, so I've made this too bright in the image. I've taken the detail from this water and made it totally bright. So though I optimized my histogram, I've made it too bright for the brightest area of the image. Now I could probably get it over to 2 or 3%. So that looks good. And if you look at that, there are going to be two numbers. So right over here, you're going to see a higher number and a lower number when I come over to this. And what that means is it was a 3, and with my adjustment, it's going to be a 1. Still a little bit too bright, so I'm going to slide that over. And in this case, I probably shouldn't slide my highlights over, but I can come back over here and read those bright spots. And right there, it was a 0, it is a 0. The water's moving, so there's probably not much detail, but I can come in here to here where there should be a little bit of detail, and I think that's looking pretty good. Understanding these values is difficult. I understand that. What I think I'll do is I'll put a general guideline when I make the blog post on my website, shutterbugacademy.net. So if you haven't visited the website yet, go ahead and check that out. It has the video tutorials, it has downloadable PDFs and other information that might not be available in the images. And they're in chronological order. Right now, I'm just working on the Photoshop one, but you can start on one and go through, and it's in sort of a logical order of the process of these videos to understand working with Photoshop. We have our histogram. Once again, we do have auto. I'm not going to hit it because it's going to set white. All right, this is the set white. You could manually come over here, click, it's going to set white. This is really going to set a white point. I know right here that it had 0, but watch what happens if I come over here. It's going to brighten that image up. So we don't want to set white because remember, it's setting 255, 255, 255, which is pure white with no detail. So we don't really want to set pure white with no detail. Up here, we have to set a neutral gray. So this is a gray point. It's going to change the color if I click somewhere weird. Yeah, that's not good. We'll hit Command Z to get out of that. Great if you know something is a complete neutral color. So we could come into here, click that. That's closer to a neutral gray. You see it didn't change. The last icon right there is to set your black point. Now this looks pretty black here, so I'll set that. It actually increased the black point. You'll notice how dark and mucky it got down here. I can come click here. That looks better, but you don't really want to set 100% black, which is 0000. And what I mean by 0000 are your red, green, and blue. So if I come down here, notice it's 0000. We don't want that. We want about 97, 98% black. So we want a little bit of value so in this case, I would open this up a little bit so it's not so dark. And I'm going to come here and open up my highlights. It's harder to open up your shadows in levels versus curves because you have a little bit more control. So this is actually called gamma here in the center. It's 1.9. That's your gamma. Just think of it as the midtones. So highlights, midtones, shadows, contrast, darkening your highlights right here. That is levels. We're going to go back up, turn levels off, turn on curves. Obviously, I'm biased, and there's quite a bit of information here in curves. So just like before, we had the black point, the gray point, the white point. Right up here on the top, you have this little hand, and I'll show you how this works. You click on this, and you go to an area of the image that you want to brighten. So mine's the blacks. So I'm going to left click and hold and drag up, and it's going to brighten that area down is going to darken, and you can do that anywhere. Now, it's adjusting the whole image because we have a white mask, but it's a targeted adjustment. So you're clicking anywhere. So I could click on the highlights and it's going to brighten those areas up. So you can see how it's adjusted that curve more towards the highlights. We'll go to the shadows, do a targeted adjustment, and you can see how it's changed the targeted adjustment right there in the shadows. It's lifting that up and flattening that image out. I don't use it. But it's something you can try. I don't find it that effective. For me, I can just move the curve because this is doing the exact same thing, and I have much more control over that image. Let's go ahead down here. We have a reset, so we'll just reset that. Right here, you have this little pencil, and you can draw to modify the curve. I've never actually used it. So just to refresh everybody on how curves works, this is your highlight side. This is your shadow side. You can either slide this way to brighten your highlights, and this is your shadows to increase your contrast this way. I don't use it all that much. Just like we did in the histogram, if your data wasn't starting to here, you could slide this over to optimize that histogram. And you can do this funky little trick. This works in levels as well, but if you hold the Option key on a Mac, the Alt on a PC, and you drag this over, you see how it turns red? That means you optimize this image. Same thing with the black. You want to get data to start appearing. If this was totally white, that would mean that you have some space here in the image. So I've adjusted this image so it's really bright, and we're going to come in here to curves. And now you see that we don't have any data starting till right here. So if I hold that Option key and I drag, you'll see there's nothing visible. And this would work exactly the same for the highlights. If I drag this over, when we start to get data, you're going to see little specks start to appear. And you'll notice right where the histogram starts is where the optimization starts. So I don't really need to click the funky key, but if you want to do something cool and trick your friends and show them a magic trick, yeah, this works great. That's what we call optimizing the image. Usually you want to slide it over to where it starts going. You just need to pay attention that in this case, I've really screwed this photo up. So I'm just going to come up here and go to revert, and that's going to take it back to how I opened it up. So curves, remember, we can come into here. This is our brightness, darkening our grays. This is flattening out our image up, increasing our contrast, and this is brightening, darkening. And in this case, if I want to open up my shadows, I can set a point here. I can come up on that curve and drag this back down, and I'm dragging it back down close to this line, because when this white line overlaps the black line, it means that it hasn't really changed or adjusted much. And so that's what we're doing here. So in this case, I've opened up my shadows, but I haven't opened or adjusted sort of the midtones to highlight values. That's how curves works. The last one that we have here is exposure, and we do have some presets, but we can increase our exposure, we can decrease our exposure, we can change the offset of the image, which is flattening it out or increasing the contrast, and our gamma, which is adjusting the midtone values. Basically, it's kind of brightening or darkening the midtone areas. Not a big fan of either one of these. We've got the little black point, gray point, and white point sliders. We're going to go ahead and hit reset. I'm going to turn that off, and we're good. Next, we have Vibrance. So what Vibrance does is, and it's not going to be beneficial in this image, is you can slide your Vibrance up and it will protect the skin tones from getting oversaturated and too bright, but it will increase the saturation of the rest of the image. So if I had a person here, I could brighten the Vibrance or colors in this background of this image, but not affect the skin tones in a subject. So that's what Vibrance does. You can also control the saturation, the overall, so we can increase this and the colors are going to get more intense, or we can decrease it and they're going to get more towards black and white. Vibrance is not something that I use. I just do it in other ways. So I can do this in color saturation and have more control over it. So one thing that Photoshop does is it has multiple ways to do the exact same thing in a little bit different technique. Right here we have color balance. And let me turn off Vibrance. Color balance, I don't really use much in Photoshop because I'm adjusting that basic color adjustment inside of Adobe Camera Raw. But basically this is a global adjustment that will make your whole image more gray, more red, more magenta, more green, more yellow, more blue. One thing I didn't show you, and we'll turn this off and go back into curves, is curves allows me to do that as well. So what we'll do is we'll come up here and we'll go into the red channel. I can grab that, and if I lift up, it makes my image more red. And if I drag down, it makes it more cyan. And basically I'm doing color balance in curves. So it allows me to do both that color balance adjustment and a brightness adjustment or luminance adjustment in the same place. And so that's a main reason why I don't really use color balance that much. I've usually already finalized most of my color inside of Adobe Camera Raw. And what I end up doing is you're going to see in hue saturation, for some reason I skipped that I'm doing my color adjustments there, not in color balance. You would think color balance would be the logical spot to do that, but it's not. So let me turn that off and go back to color balance. When you're doing the color balance, you can affect either the midtones, the highlights, or the shadows. So if I wanted to affect the shadows more, I can come in here. So if I can make my shadows more red, this doesn't mean that it's not affecting the highlights and midtones. It's just doing more in the shadows. Sometimes this is actually helpful. I do this in oversaturated yellows in backgrounds that I'll desaturate and go towards blue a little bit. But I don't really use color balance too much, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Hue saturation is my favorite. So let's go ahead and click this. So we have some presets, but we also have that targeted adjustment where you can click on that color and manually adjust it. But right here we have master. Master means we're affecting all the colors. So we're changing the colors. We can do crazy things and make all the colors different colors. That's affecting every color. The saturation of the whole image, this would make it all black and white. This would make it super neon. And the last is lightness. So it'd make the whole image brighter, the whole image darker. In my case, most of what I'm doing is identifying the problem color. Or in this case, let's say I want to make my reds redder. So I can click on master and go to red. And then I can change the color of the red. So if I wanted to make the reds more yellow, I can do that. If I want to make my reds more red, I can go to the left. So here I'm increasing the reds, making them more red. I can now increase the color saturation and make them more intense. And then I can control the brightness or darkness of those reds. And then if I want to go into yellows and just increase the saturation of yellows, bam, just like that, I've increased that saturation of yellows. So I'm controlling the color of that specific color when I do this. Down here, we have a little colorize thing. To colorize, you can come up here to this slider and slide this around, your saturation around and your lightness, and it makes it sort of a monochromatic looking color effect. So we'll go ahead and turn that off because we're not going to use it. Black and white is super simple. We click on it, it makes our image black and white. But this is why this is my favorite black and white adjustment. First, we have some presets. We have the targeted adjustment. But what I like is you can go into where reds are. So any place that has red in the photo, when I turn this on, I can either brighten it or darken the reds in the image. So in this case, we've got a lot of greens. If I want to brighten some of those greens up, I can come in here and slide that around. If I want to brighten the yellows up or darken the yellows, I can do that. So we have control over the color adjustment of black and white, because a perfectly toned color image is not a perfectly toned black and white image. They must be toned separately. So that's black and white. Now, it's still a color image. If we come up here and I click on the main image, you will see right up here, it's still RGB. To actually convert this to black and white, we need to go image mode grayscale. We're not going to do that right now, but that's what you would need to do to actually make it really black and white, but there's no reason you couldn't leave it in RGB. It just will have a larger file size. Right here we have photo filter. And if you click that, basically you can come down here and pick any color that you want. We've picked this orange color, which is a filter preset. I can click right here. This is the warming. If we wanted to do a blue filter, we could pick blue. That's the color blue. I can increase the tone or density of how much of it is getting applied. And basically it's adding that blue color over the whole image. We could specify that in a location by modifying that mask. Preserve luminosity means even though we're putting the color, don't darken an area because we're adding blue to it. So it's keeping that brightness, which is a good thing. Turn that off. Channel mixer, this is another way that people used to adjust black and whites, but you could adjust color in it as well. Just adjusting the amounts of the red, the green, and the blue channel in the image, and it can do some funky things. The only thing I usually would use it for is to switch to monochrome. And you want these numbers usually to add up to 100. You can see this is 100 right here, because if you don't, then it's just going to get the image brighter, but there's no reason you couldn't. In an image, you might not want blue, so I'm just going to hit 0 and hit return to add 0, because that's usually the noisy channel with a lot of muddy stuff in it. So then maybe I can increase this until this becomes 100. I'm pretty close. I didn't do it exactly. We still got the 100, but I've added some more green, which is normally a cleaner channel than that blue channel. So that's an old way that we used to adjust black and white. Right here we have color lookup, and this is really for just adding LUTs. So LUTs you see in videography, and we'll just do a couple of these. So that's a LUT. So we would tone our video to get this effect. It's just giving you some sort of cool looking effect to your image. You can go through here and try these different LUTs to see what they do to your images. I don't use them, but that's what they do. Invert will just invert your image from a negative to a positive. Really easy to cover. Posterize, never use it. It gives you this weird kind of effect, and you can slide this slider to either get more or less of this posterized effect. Threshold. So you'll see here, we can do this. A lot of times you'll use threshold when you're trying to create like clip art, some sort of illustration look, but you can slide the threshold to get more or less of that contrasty look. Not super useful in photography, but there is a use for threshold. Selective color is just like hue saturation, except for what you'll see is that we do not have a saturation in this. We do have a lightness, sort of darkness adjustment, but you have more control over the color because we can go into the red channel, as you can see here, and we can adjust the cyans, the magentas, and the yellows of the red to get a more exact color and the brightness. And you can do yellows, cyans, blues, magentas, whites, neutrals, and blacks. You can adjust that. So I do use selective color, especially when I really need to refine something and get it more exact. The last one is gradient map. So we're going to click on gradient map, and this is a pretty cool effect. We'll go into this later in the tutorials, but basically we're getting a reverse here. So let's click this. We're going to apply a gradient to the image. So right now the gradient being applied is this one, but I can also go in here and change this. So if I wanted this a blue gradient, we'll pick this one. So we're adding this gradient to our image. It's a little strong. And what I can do is click in the blending modes that we see up here and drop down to color. and that's going to change the way the effect is. And it's still too strong. So I can come up here to where it says opacity, and we're going to lower that. So I'll do it the old way, which is just kind of slide, drag that down. And so now we're doing 50% of this gradient and 50% of the color. I could actually make the black and white adjustment here and drag this below it. And now it's not going to add the color, but as I lower that gradient map, it's going to just lower that into a black and white photo instead of bringing back the color. So if you don't want to bring back the color, you put a black and white adjustment below the gradient map, and you can get this effect. And you can get all kinds of really cool split toning effects by doing this method, and we'll take a look at that later. That's it on what we have the adjustments here inside of Adobe Photoshop. If you found this video helpful and could give me a thumbs up, that would be great. We want to get this new channel going. You can visit us at shutterbugacademy.net. So I've created a website with a whole bunch of other information. Don't forget, we have a Facebook group called Shutterbug Academy where you can get more in-depth information if you're running into issues. Don't forget to subscribe and have a wonderful day.